Welcome back, dear students. Today our topic is ground tissue system. Before we start discussing ground tissue system, let's recapitulate what we have so far studied in the previous part. Yesterday I told you something about dermal tissue system, and under dermal tissue system we discussed epidermis, then cuticle, then we discussed stomata, and finally trichomes. Let's get started with ground tissue system. All tissues except epidermis and vascular bundles, they constitute the ground tissue system. Ground tissue system forms the bulk of plant body, and this tissue system may be constituted of parenchymatous, collonchymatous, sclerenchymatous, glandular, or Let's-Ferris tissues. Okay. The ground tissue system, it originates from the ground meristem, which is a specific type of meristem that is entirely devoted to the formation of ground tissue. There are distinct regions of ground tissue system. These include cortex, pericycle, and pith. We will discuss each of these distinct zones of ground tissue one by one. First one is cortex. Cortex is the region between epidermis and pericycle. The cortex is distinct in dicotyledons, but not in monocotyledons, where there is no clear demarcation between cortex and pith. Okay, याद रखना, in case of dicotyledons, the cortex is very much distinct as compared to that in monocots, because in monocots there is no clear-cut demarcation between cortex and pith. The cells of cortex, they are primary cells. Okay, that means they are derived from the primary meristems, and these cells may be parenchymatous, collonchymatous, or sclerenchymatous. I do not need to tell you what are collonchymatous, parenchymatous, and sclerenchymatous cells. We have already discussed this in one of our classes. The cortex of roots is homogeneous. This is very much important. It means the cortex of roots is made up of only one type of cells, and these cells are parenchymatous. However, in case of stems, the cortex is further differentiated into distinct zones. The first one is hypodermis, second one is general cortex, and third one is endodermis. Okay. First of all, hypodermis. It is the zone of cortex which lies inner to epidermis, and this zone of cells, it may be constituted of collonchymatous, sclerenchymatous, or collonchymatous cells in dicot stem. However, in case of monocot stems, the hypodermis is exclusively constituted of sclerenchymatous cells. The function of hypodermis is it provides the mechanical strength to the stems. The second one is general cortex. It lies inner to hypodermis, and it is constituted of parenchymatous cells only. The function of general cortex is it helps us in the storage of food material. Here you can see in the image, this layer represents epidermis, and inner to epidermis, this region of cells, this zone of cells, it is known as hypodermis. Okay, and hypodermis is followed by general cortex, and then the general cortex is followed by a single layer of cells which is known as endodermis. Okay, that we will discuss in the next slide. So endodermis is the next zone of cortex. Excuse me. Endodermis is also known as star sheath. Okay, it is named as star sheath in case of stems. याद रखना, it is named as star sheath in case of stems. So let's move on with endodermis. Endodermis is a single layer of compactly arranged parenchymatous cells, and this single layer of parenchymatous cells which are compactly arranged, it represents the innermost layer of cortex. The cells of endodermis, they are elongated and barrel shaped. Here you can see these are elongated and barrel shaped. They are compactly placed to each other. The endodermis of roots is more clearly distinct as compared to that of the stem. In case of stem, this individual layer of cells is not called endodermis. Instead, it is known as star sheath, and it serves the function of storage of starch. That is why it is known as star sheath in case of stems. Here we can see the endodermis. This is the transverse section of a root. Okay, this layer represents epidermis. These are the root hairs. This is the homogeneous region of cortex, and the innermost layer of cortex is known as endodermis. Here we will see it here. Okay, these are the cells of endodermis. The transverse and the radial walls of the endodermal cells, they are having a deposition of waxy material which is known as suberin. Okay, they show a deposition of waxy material known as suberin, and this suberin is not permeable to water. It does not allow water to go back from the vascular tissues back into the cortex. Okay, you have to discuss the apoplast and the symplast transport in physiology. At that time you will come to know what is the function of this deposition which is known as Casparin strip. I will repeat, the individual cells of the endodermis, they possess Casparin strips. Okay, Casparin strips are actually the depositions of suberin which are laid down on their transverse and radial walls, and these Casparin strips, they help to prevent the backflow of water from the xylem into the cortex. Now, pericycle. Pericycle is single layered or multi-layered cylinder of thin or thick walled cells. In cucurbita stem, the pericycle is represented by sclerenchymatous cells. Okay, and the pericycle is present between the endodermis and vascular tissues. The location of pericycle is, it is located between endodermis and vascular tissues. In roots, the pericycle is made up of thin-walled parenchymatous cells which later on give rise to lateral roots. जो lateral roots बनते हैं, they arise from the thin-walled parenchymatous cells of pericycle. In dicot roots, the cork cambium originates in the pericycle, which results in the formation of periderm. When we will study secondary growth, you will come to know what is periderm. And this periderm originates from the cork cambium that is formed from the pericycle. Here you can see this is the epidermis. Then we have here the cortex. Okay, cortex of root, which is homogeneous. This is the innermost layer of cortex named as endodermis. Then after endodermis we have this single layer of cells which is known as pericycle. Okay, and finally pith or medulla. Pith or medulla, it occupies the central position of root and stem. जो central position होती है एक root में और stem में, it is made up of pith or medulla. The cells of pith, they are mostly parenchymatous and they possess large intercellular spaces between themselves. Sometimes pith becomes hollow. The cells of pith are lost and the pith becomes hollow, resulting in the formation of a pith cavity. Example is in case of some water plants. In dicot stem, the pith cells between vascular bundles, they become radially elongated, and these radially elongated cells, they are known as primary medullary rays or pith rays, and these primary medullary rays, they help in the lateral translocation of materials. Okay. The main function of pith or medulla is it helps in the storage of water and food reserves. Here you can see in the image this inner region of stem, this is known as pith. Okay, and some of the cells of this pith, they become radially elongated and are positioned between the vascular bundles, primary vascular bundles. This region of cells is known as primary medullary rays or pith rays. And finally, the ground tissue system of leaves. The ground tissue system of leaves, first of all we will discuss petiole. The ground tissue of petiole of a leaf, it is made up of, this is the petiole, okay, this is lamina. The ground tissue of this petiole, it is made up of uniform parenchymatous cells with intercellular spaces. Okay, जो petiole होता है, it is ground tissue is made up of parenchymatous cells with intercellular spaces between the cells. In lamina, द ग्राउंड टिश्यू इज कॉल्ड एज मेसोफिल. जो लैमिना का ग्राउंड टिश्यू होता है उसको हम मेसोफिल बोलते हैं. एंड दिस मेसोफिल इज डिफरेंशिएटेड इनटू पैलिसेड एंड स्पॉन्जी पैरेन्काइमा. ओके. The cells of this ground tissue of lamina, they are thin walled and possess chloroplasts, and because of the presence of chloroplasts, they perform photosynthesis. Here we can see in the image, this is the ground tissue system of leaves. This represents the mesophyll, and this mesophyll is constituted of palisade cells, which are elongated cells. Okay, these are the elongated cells which are placed compactly. They are placed one above the other, okay, in the form of layers. And this region is known as the spongy parenchyma. Here in this region, the cells are parenchymatous, and they are placed in such a way that some intercellular spaces are present between the cells. And both the spongy parenchyma and this palisade parenchyma, the cells of these regions, they are parenchymatous and they possess chloroplasts, and because of the presence of chloroplasts, they perform photosynthesis. Okay, this is all about ground tissue system. I hope you all understand this. In the next part, we are going to discuss the vascular tissue system. Till then, stay blessed and thank you.